Welcome to a very exciting episode of One Man's Tracks. Today, we're reviewing the very first independently released album to go gold and then platinum. Probably the best-selling new age album ever. Very deserving of those titles and many more. Somehow an artist and an album I'd never heard of, and probably you might not have either. This is Ray Lynch's Deep Breakfast. This album was released originally in 1984, as I said, independently. I believe it sold over 70,000 copies just out of this guy's apartment in California. And it's a new age album that's ambient instrumental paradise. Absolute bliss. It's got all sorts of incredible titles to these songs, so let me just get right into the album for you. Just before I do that, the one place you might recognize some Ray Lynch music is the GTA 4 soundtrack. The second song in the album is on the radio. The electronic experimentations that go on here are timeless and create an almost otherworldly ambiance. I have almost nothing bad to say about this album. It enters straight into your imagination with the very first track, Celestial Soda Pop. Through the futuristic synth layering, this track takes you on a cosmic opera of complementing, reverberating instrumentation that leaves you with a feeling of floating through nothingness. It's an emotional experience, every single track, almost always ending leaving you wanting more. I like to think of the next track as sort of the water level experience in terms of a backtrack to a video game. The O of pleasure flows over you with beautiful trickling synth arpeggios that just tickle your eardrums, pull you forward into a truly ambient experience of sort of a foreign nature. Another song you could just loop forever. But moving on to the shortest track on the album, Falling in the Garden. Sort of a transition or come down from the previous two experiences that you just had. It pulls you up with a really light synth piano that just plucks away lightly and smoothly, just kind of soothing you into a nice, more stable state. It's sort of like being pulled back into the real world, but in slow motion. The next track, Your Feeling Shoulders, is another slower but a lot more sinister or foreboding air about it. It's a long journey of tribulation through many peaks and valleys, taking you along for the ride, as all these tracks do, through complex layering of these beautiful synths. It winds you down a flowing river of sound, once again leaving you feeling sort of peaceful and calm, but still not shaking that sinister air. The uncertain beginning to this track begins to slowly cascade, revealing a beautiful synth organ combo with a synth horn. The music pulls and pushes in an accordion-like fashion that makes it feel like you're being almost breathed by the music. The song encompasses the feeling of sitting in a grand cathedral with beautiful stained glass, with morning light shining through it. The emotions this album puts forward are quite vivid. I'd highly recommend your local church invest in a synth organ. On to another never-ending adventure of a track, Rhythm in the Pews, using a circular sound that just keeps rolling and rolling forever and ever if you'd allow it. I think this is the perfect track to accompany sort of an 8-bit side-scrolly RPG adventure. Putting the synths into the background on Kathleen's song and pulling out a viola. The viola? Viola? Viola. The viola creates this forlorn, reminiscent feeling of a fall afternoon, maybe a spring morning, a day where it doesn't look like the sun's going to come out at all, but you want to go out for a walk anyways. Or maybe it's a little damp outside or something. It's really well guided by these super non-intrusive synth layers that take you through the whole track. Pastoral is the second last track on the album, and it's probably the least memorable cut out of the bunch. It just sort of feels like a fond farewell, or maybe just a thanks for playing. Really not much here to unpack for me. He rounds out the track with a song called Tiny Geometries. It sees the return of those submersive synth layers and all-encompassing arpeggios that you heard on the O of Pleasure, with a final triumphant rise and fall and rise and fall. It creates the beautiful feeling of sailing off into a forever sunset on an ocean of diamonds. Truly ahead of its time, and obviously struck a chord at the time of its release. Ray Lynch managed to proliferate this album out of his apartment up until the point where he could be signed by a real distributing label. An independent record company was basically formed around this album. All that culminating to me picking this up 35 years later for $1 at a thrift shop. Well worth it. And I recommend paying up to $4 or $5 for this. This is a gem. This is a piece that you'd like to have in your collection. I'm sure of it. If you're into any kind of ambient, instrumental, fun synth music, video game soundtracks, this is a 10 out of 10 would recommend. Get on it. Ray Lynch, deep breakfast. This is a deep enough breakfast to have enough to share with the neighbors. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Hope to see you next time on One Man's Tracks.